can imagine seeing that, be like, and then be like, oh, thank God, it's just birds. Woo! Jesus Christ. That would be a scare, wouldn't it?
God, he's got sharp claws.
Today's video is brought to you by Ridge, and they have an exciting offer for you, and I'm going to tell you more about that a little bit later. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Brain Blaze. Thank you for being here.
He dead! Oh, he dead for sure!
Good start. Why I was here is one of our writers in this case, Kevin. Thank you, Kevin, has written me a script. The strangest times animals almost caused World War III. Where the f*** do we get these ideas from? Who comes up with this? If I came up with this, I'd be genuinely surprised. Did Kevin come up with this? Did you smoke crack and then sit down and come up with some title ideas?
Exactly. Yes, I have smoked crack cocaine.
Kevin will probably write me an email after he sees this, be like, Simon, you came up with that. Oh, for f***'s sake. Who's going to watch this? I'll never forget how disappointed I was when the Soviet Union fell. Ah, yes. When did this? 1993? I was alive. I was 6 years old, so I don't really remember it. But also the sense of crushing disappointment at the end of the Red Dream was palpable. My older brother was a grade ahead of me in school, and as a result, so were a lot of my friends. I would usually wind up having the same teachers that they did, which meant I got a lot of advanced knowledge of what the classes were going to be like. That meant that I knew what nightmare was in store for me the following year, thanks to the fall of communism. What? What?
What the fuck is this?
So, let me interrupt today's video to tell you about our fantastic sponsor, Ridge. Started thinking about Father's Day gifts. Yeah, look, it'd be tough to find something that's useful and unique, but luckily, Ridge has got you covered. This is the last wallet you'll ever need. It's designed to hold up to 12 cards and cash. I just have like 3 things in there. I've got a couple of bank cards and my ID. I'm not sure what, like, people, I mentioned, like, isn't it crazy, like 12 cards? And people were like, oh, Simon, I have 17 cards. I'm like, what are you carrying around? So people gave me lists. And I was like, wow, okay. It's like, literally, I'll carry like 2 or 3 cards. That's all I will carry. Plus, also, there's a little strap on the back here, so you can keep some cash in there as well, just in case you need a little bit of money handy. They've also got the key case, which is brilliant. This is like a Swiss Army knife, but for keys. I put my office keys on here. Outside, top, bottom lock, and then the little post box. So easy. No more jangling around. Plus, they've got over 30 styles to choose from, and they match up. So this is the key case in carbon fiber, and then this is the wallet in carbon fiber, and this is the wallet in titanium. And there are 28 other options. Plus, they're made out of RFID blocking materials, so you can protect your data from digital pickpockets or the data of your dad. It's a Father's Day gift, remember? Plus, they've got an optional AirTag attachment, which I don't actually have, which I'll be excited to receive, Ridge, whenever you're ready, because I love AirTags, and I do often misplace my wallet and everything else I own. But don't take my word for it. Ridge has over 3 million satisfied customers and 50,000 5-star reviews. And if for some reason you're not completely happy with your purchase, they offer a 99-day trial period and a lifetime warranty. And here's the best part. You can save up to 40% during Ridge's Father's Day sale, happening now through June the 10th. So what are you waiting for? Make your dad's day with a Ridge wallet or a Ridge key case, and use my unique link, ridge.com/blaze, to get the best deal. That's ridge.com/blaze. So thank you to Ridge, and now back to today's video. My 5th grade social studies class was going to culminate with a final exam so cruel in its simplicity. We would each be given a map and told we had 45 minutes to identify and name capital city of every single country in the world. This is obviously the sort of thing you should be learning in school. I've never forgotten the capital of Burkina Faso is Ouagadougou. Why does anyone need to know this? No one needs to know this. I don't understand why we had to spend school memorizing dates and places and things like this, because you just would look them up when you need them, wouldn't you? Why would you ever need to learn this? It's just filling your brain with crap, so there's no room for other crap, because brains get full. As I know, my brain is full.
Full of shit!
My brother and my friends got to mark off half of Eurasia as simply being the USSR, but I had to learn 15 extra countries. That's not to say the fall of the Soviet Union wasn't a good thing. While I only grew up during the very tail end of it, I still have some understanding of how terrifying the Cold War was. Kevin, this introduction is too long.
It's an ironic comment on our expectations of him. A funhouse image of our model of Kevin.
Kevin says something about war being bad and then animals. And now we'll get into the actual content that you're all here for. You're welcome. More warmongering than the average bear. It was October 1962, and the Cuban Missile Crisis was at its most tense point. The Soviets had begun constructing nuclear missile launch sites on Cuba that would allow them to strike deep into the United States mainland with limited warning time. President Kennedy was outraged by this unprecedented show of aggression, seeming to have forgotten, US, you had missile sites in Turkey, wasn't it? Like, unprecedented. Yo, bro, Turkey. Oh yeah, sorry, forgot about Turkey. And not to mention Europe. Forgotten that the United States had built missile sites in Turkey the year before for the exact same reason. The entire US Armed Forces had been at DEFCON 3, which meant that the Air Force had to be ready to mobilize in only 15 minutes notice. Even scarier, the Strategic Air Command, the group actually responsible for the nuclear arsenal, was at DEFCON 2. Do we know this for sure? I thought DEFCON was something that they didn't release. Like, they don't tell you what DEFCON we're at, and people just end up guessing. Although this could have been declassified since, right? And as far as we understand, there's never been a DEFCON 1, which is like nuclear war is about to happen. Or is it happening at DEFCON 1? I don't know. I know about this from movies. They have the lights on the wall and DEFCON 1 is white. It was the first time any section of the US military had been at DEFCON 2, and everyone was extremely on edge. By October the 25th, the US Navy had blockaded Cuba, and there were Soviet ships heading directly for the blockade. That's when an Air Force guard, Duluth Sector Direction Center, saw a Soviet saboteur attempting to climb the security fence. The military had been warned that preceding a Soviet first strike, they would send special forces to sabotage American command centers. Really? That just seems like you're tipping your hat. Like, wait. The American military thought that before the Soviets launch a nuclear attack, they're going to have special operatives go to all of America's nuclear sites and disable their nuclear weapons. You're fucking dreaming.
Duh.
Like, how are they gonna... Where are they going to come from? How are they going to get there? There's that many spies? If there's that many spies, you've been doing a shit job. The guard immediately fired at the intruder and pulled the sabotage alarm, an alarm that was connected to several other bases in the area. It was then that the sentry noticed there was something unusual about this particular saboteur. He was much larger and hairier than your typical Soviet. Once the alarm was sounded, he also began to saunter back into the woods on 4 legs. So it was less of a sabotage attempt and more of a typical Minnesota black bear that smelled food from the base's dumpster and wanted to bulk up a little more before hibernation time. I'm sure everybody at Duluth had a good laugh as they began informing the other bases of what had happened, but there was a problem. One of the bases was like, "Fucking fire the missiles!" I mean, obviously not, because we're all here, but wow. One of the bases that their alarm was connected to was Volkfield in Wisconsin, and it had been improperly wired. While all of the other bases were hearing the sabotage alarm at Volkfield, it's go time alarm was sounding. Oh no! Did they just like wire it up to the wrong one? It's like this is supposed to be like the sabotage light goes off, and then someone just accidentally connected it to the fucking launch the nukes button. Jesus. They had been told once they reached DEFCON 3 that there would not be any drills or practice alarms, so pilots began rushing to their planes to take off with their nuclear payloads.
Look! What is it, JJ?
We're gonna bomb the Russians! The alarm they heard was only supposed to sound in the event of incoming Soviet bombers, and with the Soviet fleet rapidly approaching the American blockade, they already knew their target. I can't believe I don't know this story. This shit's wild! They didn't have a moment to waste, but they didn't have a radio control tower at the base either. This meant that once the base commander made contact with Duluth and realized what was happening, he had no way to contact the pilots who were already starting their engines. Wait, how? What? The planes didn't have radios? The planes all have radios. Planes have had radios since planes. Luckily, the base commander had a backup plan. Have somebody hop into a jeep and floor it to the runway while flashing their headlights to block the planes from taking off. That dude must be like, oh my god, I'm saving the world right now. I am saving the fucking world. And then the plane takes off and he's like, by some miracle, they made it in time to stop the planes, thus narrowly avoiding a nuclear World War III. And that is how one singular bear nearly destroyed the entire human race.
That's a fucking bear.
Whiskey on the rocks. Love some whiskey on the rocks. Not everything needs to be quite so dramatic as a faulty alarm nearly triggering nuclear war, though. International relations are a complicated game of chess, and sometimes the simple push of a pawn can reveal the underlying intent for a full-scale attack. At the highest levels of chess, it's rare for a pawn move to result in the opponent ordering a full-scale nuclear strike on the enemy king, but yeah, that's not a thing in chess. It's like, okay, knight to b4, nuclear strike to c6. Ba-da-bum-bum. God, that was a bad joke, wasn't it? That was truly weak. Not that this channel's known for its good jokes, but that was bad. I felt bad telling that joke. I was like, this is just too try hard. It's just not even good. I'm so down on myself.
Why are you the way that you are?
But you still need to stay focused on their plans and ensure that you aren't taken off guard by a sneak attack. On October the 27th, 1981, a Soviet submarine accidentally ran aground off the coast of Sweden, just 10 kilometers from one of the largest Swedish naval bases. The Soviet submarine... the guy that commander of the submarine is like, oh, fuck. Not this bullshit. The Soviet submarine, known by the catchy designation U-137, was a Soviet Navy Whiskey-class submarine. Oh, whiskey on the rocks! Ba-da-bum-bum! Resulting in this incident being nicknamed Whiskey on the Rocks. Yeah, Kevin, we got there! I got there! My big brain saw the title and was like, yes! Excuse me. I just had lunch before coming to make this episode, so I apologize for burping. I didn't have a Coke or anything, but I feel a little gaseous.
Don't do it! No!
That's a light-hearted name for what turned into a rather serious situation. The Soviets claimed that their navigation equipment had malfunctioned, which is how they wound up inside Sweden's restricted military zone, where they absolutely did not belong. It's, oh, sorry, a wrong turn. My bad. We'll leave. No one believes you. For anybody unfamiliar with Sweden's coast, which included me before researching this, that sounds like a totally reasonable explanation. I mean, the sub crashed and got stuck. The idea that the nav equipment wasn't working properly seems like a pretty good explanation of how that could happen. No, they were spying and then they ran aground. Why would they be in there in the first place? However, U-137 would have already had to navigate a rather treacherous series of rocks, straits, and islands to get as close to the Swedish base as they had, a task that would be nigh impossible if their equipment was malfunctioning. It broke just before we crashed. It looks like someone smashed it with a hammer. It's like, before it happened. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. Oh, f*** off.
Oh, sorry. Oh, I'm sorry.
It didn't help matters that during the 10 days the submarine was stranded on the rock, the Swedish military secretly measured for radioactive materials from outside the hull of the sub. They were able to detect the presence of uranium localized entirely within one of the torpedo tubes, indicating that U-137 may be armed with nuclear warheads. I'd say we can turn that may and turn it into a was armed with nuclear warheads, because it's not like where should we put the nuclear reactor that powers the sub? Inside the torpedo tubes? Seems like a good place for it. After those 10 days had passed, the Swedes used tugboats to drag the damaged submarine off the rocks and return it to the Soviets in international waters. That's very nice of them, and it's a good thing that that's the route the Swedish government decided to take. After the submarine was returned, the Soviets confirmed that U-137 was in fact armed with nuclear weapons, and that they were under strict orders to blow up the warheads in the entire sub if Swedish forces attempted to take control of the vessel. What? Wait, I mean, you can scuttle a vessel without setting off its nuclear bomb. Surely the orders were to set off the conventional explosives, not the nuclear one. Surely you'd be like, well, let's jettison the nuclear one and then blow up the sub. You wouldn't set off a nuclear bomb, would you? I mean, the Soviets were pretty wild, but that seems a little bit unnecessary.
Duh.
So everything had a happy ending, right? Well, not so fast. The Swedish military became extremely paranoid of Soviet intervention, and they began intensely monitoring their seas for submarine activity. They found 6 other submarines. No, I don't know. Whoops-a-daisy! We're all stuck on these rocks again. I know. It happens all the time. It's awkward. Using hydrophones, they measured sounds in the water. These sounds were ranked from 1 to 6, with 1 being definitely a sub, and 5 being definitely not a sub, and 6 being indecipherable audio. The rank 1 sound is that of most interest, and it was named the typical sound, as it was the sound that would typically expect to be heard from a submarine. Whenever they heard this sound, their sonar would confirm the presence of a large object in the water, but their military could never find any Soviet subs. Oh, I see. These are like whales or some shit, aren't they? The Swedish military must have thought they were going crazy. They could hear the subs and their sonar could detect them, but every time they investigated, there was nothing there. This caused mounting tensions between Sweden and the Soviet Union, with the United States even recommending that Sweden more heavily arm their waters against a potential invasion. For 10 years, everyone took this threat seriously until the Cold War finally ended in 1991. It had been a pretty scary decade, but now things were finally over, right? Well, no. Despite the fall of the Soviet Union, activity continued to be detected off Sweden's coast. Sweden's Prime Minister, Carl Bildt, sent a letter to the new Russian President, Boris Yeltsin, essentially saying, dude, cut this shit out already. But the submarine activity continued. It's not submarines, right? This isn't about animals, so it's got to be like whales. But why are they making submarine noises? Finally, after 15 years of believing their sovereign territory was under constant surveillance and threat from the Russians, the government decided to call in some scientists. Wait. Who is monitoring the hydrophones? Why isn't it scientists? There's some private in the military that's listening there. Sounds like a submarine to me. And a scientist like, that's a whale. Sergeant's just like, bro, it's a whale. I could have told you that easily. I'm a whaleologist.
I'm the professor.
Then prepare to see a bureaucrat's brain in action.
It turns out that the vast majority activity that they detected had nothing to do with the Soviet Union, and nothing detected after 1991 had anything to do with Russia. The true culprit was one of Sweden's favourite foods, herring. Wait, herrings are small. Herrings swim in massive, dense schools that can be multiple kilometers wide and 40 meters deep. Holy shit, really? That's a lot bigger than a submarine, so it would be easy for a school of herring to be picked up by sonar. But what the hell was that damn sound? Well, all bony fish have swim bladders, but there's a distinct biological trait that appears only in the herring. The swim bladder is connected to the anal duct. Oh, they were listening to fish farts, weren't they? By applying pressure to the swim bladder, herring can release air out of their anus, creating a tiny sound bubble and creating a tiny sound and releasing some air bubbles. The sound that the Swedish military had spent 15 years chasing and that had pushed them to the brink of both war and insanity was the sound of a billion herring farting in unison. But it's insane. I get that like the fish farting is funny and stuff, but the craziest thing is why the didn't they bring in a scientist earlier to be like, oh, let me have a listen. Let me put on those headphones. Iran, so far away. In the 1950s, the United States wanted to build an early detection system as a first line of defense against ICBMs launched from the Soviet Union towards America. There were multiple systems put into place across Canada, something the Canadians weren't exactly thrilled about, and they all had super creative names. For example, the system we are concerned with today was the MidCanada Line, a line of radar stations that you can probably guess the location of. Middle of Canada, maybe. The MCL was completed in 1956 while awaiting completion of a distant early warning line to be completed further north in Canada. The reason that the MCL had to be built was that the existing system, the Pine Tree Line, was too close to the United States. By the time it detected an oncoming missile, there would be barely enough time to launch a counterstrike, so the Soviets could join us in hell, let alone do anything to actually save people. Can you imagine building that whole line? That whole massive line? That's fucking too close, isn't it? It's going to be real expensive and time-consuming to fix. This was obviously not an ideal scenario, so the MCL was designed to give America a little more time to react. In that regard, it definitely worked. The MCL was essentially a tripwire that would alert the US military of any oncoming object with enough time to scramble the jets and prepare to engage oncoming missiles and launch a counteroffensive. How does that work? Can jets shoot down? I mean, I'm sure they can. But aren't missiles extremely fast? Like an intercontinental ballistic missile is coming down from like space and shit really quickly. How does a plane shoot that? Planes are like quick, but not that quick. I guess they could shoot, they see it, they shoot a missile of their own at it, maybe, something like that. It must work. I've seen it in movies. Unfortunately, there were a few problems with the system that became immediately obvious once the radar stations were turned on. The first problem is that radar wasn't nearly as sophisticated back then as it is now. Sure, they could tell that something had just passed by the towers, but if they could tell you what trajectory it was on or how fast it was flying. They couldn't even tell how big the object was. It was just that literally something had gone over it. This isn't exactly the most useful military intel, and it led to the much larger problem of flocks of birds. I was just thinking, what if a bird just flies over this thing and they're like, scramble the F-15s! And there's like 7 fighter pilots rushing to their craft. Tom Cruise is there. He's chopping with his arms. He gets into the plane. They all fire off and it's like, there's just a bird. And then they have to take their F-15s back. It's like $20,000 to fly them for an hour. Then they need like 20 hours of maintenance, which is crazy. And it's very, very expensive. This doesn't seem like it was a great idea to build this thing. While a single bird is unlikely to have triggered the MCL, flocks of migratory birds absolutely could, and they did, all the time. There were so many flocks of birds flying past the radar towers that even if a Soviet plane or missile had flown past it, it was unlikely that anybody would know. It's gotta be funny. And that's the reason that the world was most likely to end during the bird migratory season. A year later, the distant early warning line and its much more advanced radar towers solved this problem, but for the year that the MCL was America's first line of defense, it was absolute chaos. Probably anyway. We know that both American and Canadian forces responded the first time MCL was tripped, but I can't say for certain what that response was, as those documents haven't been declassified. Considering they thought they had just detected nuclear warheads careening towards American soil, it's fair to say that their response was probably quite big. Yeah, they're all running to their planes, and they're like, it's nothing. And then they're like, we'll just turn off the alarm. The birds flying over the radar thing and the pilots all going to the crafts is like the equivalent of your smoke detector beeping about the batteries. And then you're like, let's not just put new batteries in there, let's just take the batteries out so it doesn't beep anymore. That's what they did to their extremely expensive radar defense thing. They were just like for a year until they got it fixed. Which, I mean, it's not responsible to take the batteries out of your smoke alarm. It's definitely not responsible to have your radar system that protects your entire population from nuclear Armageddon. Should have that turned on. It came from outer space. We've covered how animals attempted to escalate Cold War tensions by land, air, and sea, to the point that the only thing standing between the human race and nuclear annihilation was one dude in a Jeep. That covers all of the branches of the military that existed back then. But these days, there's a fourth branch of the military, Space Force. Which is there's a nice Netflix show with Steve Carell called Space Force, which sadly got cancelled, and John Malkovich. It's really good. I'd recommend giving it a watch. But then it got cancelled on a cliffhanger, so that's a bummer. We certainly could have used it back then, because attempts to incite World War III came not only from Earth, but from space as well. Of course, there weren't any animals floating in space that could try to ignite conflict between the world's nations, so instead the celestial bodies themselves had to step in. Both the sun and the moon are responsible for false alarms that could have triggered a nuclear attack. The instance with the moon is probably much more well known. On October the 5th, 1960, NORAD, bro. It was sent into high alert after radar equipment in Greenland detected what was thought to be a large-scale attack of nearly 1,000 ICBMs heading towards the United States. Kiss your ass goodbye. How many cities are there in America? There's not 1,000, right? Like big ones. That would be devastating. That'd be really, really bad news. Fortunately, this was quickly determined to be a false alarm. Some of the you can imagine seeing that, be like, and they'd be like, oh, thank God, it's just birds. Woo! Jesus Christ. That would be a scare, wouldn't it?
You are being shagged by a rare parrot.
God, he's got sharp claws.
Some of the computer data wasn't making sense, and US intel said that the Soviets only had 4 ICBMs at the time. It's definitely possible that they had that wrong, but to be wrong by a factor of 250 seemed pretty unlikely. As news of the alarm went up the chain of command, it finally reached NORAD's chief of intelligence, who asked one simple question: where exactly was Nikita Khrushchev? It was a largely rhetorical question, as everybody knew Khrushchev was at the United Nations in New York at the time. Oh, that's genius. That's why you're head of intelligence. It's like, where's Khrushchev? He's in New York. Well then, they're not coming, are they?
Remember, it's just pooper. Let it flow.
While the Soviets were perceived as being far more open to beginning mutually assured destruction than the Americans were, it's unlikely they would have launched an attack while their nation's leader was in the United States. It turns out what NORAD had actually seen was the moon. Not some rare astronomical occurrence or unlikely atmospheric conditions, just the regular old moon sitting there in the sky where it always was. And then there's the sun. On September the 26th, 1983, Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov was in a Soviet bunker monitoring the early warning systems. The early warning satellite sent him a warning about an incoming nuclear missile. In the event such an attack was detected, the Soviet Union's official compulsory policy was to immediately launch a nuclear counterattack. So once the alert came in to Petrov, he did the only thing he could do: tell absolutely nobody. Not long after, he received another alert of 4 more missiles, and once again he took no action. Fucking hero. Oh God, does he know, or he's just like, I'm not going to start nuclear Armageddon. I'm sorry, I'm just not going to do it. You see, while others would simply follow orders and alert their superiors like they were supposed to, Petrov had a little something called common fucking sense. The United States had 3,000 nuclear warheads aimed directly at Russia. If they were going to launch a first strike, why the hell would they only fire 1 or even 4 missiles that could easily be intercepted? Wouldn't they fire several hundred at once? He was right to question such a nonsensical tactical decision, as the satellite hadn't picked up nuclear weapons at all. What it had detected was the sun reflecting off some high-altitude clouds in an extremely improbable way. While it's fun to look back at all of these near catastrophes and laugh, it must have been devastatingly terrifying at the time. Yeah, the dude looking at the 1,000 incoming ICBMs being like, ah! The human race came damn close to full-on nuclear war dozens of times, and a single bear nearly caused the destruction of all mankind. So I don't know, go hug your loved ones or something. Yeah, world's pretty fucking wild, isn't it? Thanks for watching. Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Brain Blaze. Thank you for being here.
He dead! Oh, he dead for sure!
Good start.